Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Jamal, what are we taking a look at today?
You know, the short straw got drawn by our friend Crystal Ball as she had to spend a couple days in Miami. But
Poor Crystal.
I know. We'll hear from her today. She got a bunch of good interviews. And we'll talk a little bit about those debates last night. And the president is overseas.
That's right. He's in Osaka, Japan. He's made some interesting comments, as usual. All of that coming up today on Rising. Before we jump into what's on our radars, Jamal, let's take a second to actually talk about our impressions from night 2 of the Democratic debates. From my side of the aisle, the thing that got most people talking was the candidates' position on healthcare and immigration. Specifically, where those two issues intertwine. When asked, all 10 of the candidates on the stage last night said that they would give limitless free healthcare to illegal immigrants. There's a reason that was the only thing from last night that got a response from President Trump. I'm also old enough to remember when President Obama gave an entire speech to Congress just to reassure them that those who enter and live in this country illegally would not benefit from Obamacare. The change is such a stark shift from that position. And I also think that Joe Biden really came out of this looking kind of sleepy, just like President Trump likes to tease him. He struggled to give coherent answers. At times, he looked like he actually wanted the moderators to cut him off. Who voluntarily gives up time in a Democratic debate? But I think that the actual big winner last night, just like the conventional wisdom, was Kamala Harris. Not only did she resurrect her campaign in a single night, but she actually positioned herself as one of the 4 favorites to actually win this primary. The others are Biden, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. She wasn't afraid to interject. She shut Joe Biden down on race, and she actually managed to do a better job of controlling the candidates than the moderators did.
You know, I agree with you on the top talent in the debate, Saagar, but I think one of my favorite lines here, my big top line takeaways here from last night was the death of the myth of the governor as president. We have seen over the course of the last few elections, you know, you think about it, Reagan, and then Bill Clinton, and then George W. Bush. We had these governors who would all run for office and run for president. But last night, we saw Hickenlooper, the former governor of Colorado, and Jay Inslee, who was governor of Washington. Neither one of them failed to make any kind of headway on the debate stage. We used to think the governors go on to make great presidents, but now we've seen 9 governors run since George W. Bush was elected president, and none of them, whether in the primary or Mitt Romney as the nominee, none of them have been successful. I thought Bernie let his presence be known by being his usual sort of irascible self. Bernie doesn't really care what you think about him. He's going to say what he thinks. 2 other people made an impact last night. I'm just not sure it was entirely positive. Marianne Williamson, who I really like a lot as a person. She's a really wonderful woman. She was a talk on Twitter last night for some of her kind of unconventional talking points. I mean, she's, you know, we think that Cory Booker is the head of Love and Light. Marianne Williamson, she really lives in the light. Lives in the light. And then Andrew Yang, he seemed to get some early buzz after showing up tireless, but he wasn't able to capitalize on it and faded from a lot of people's minds as the night wore on. However, I also agree. I thought that Pete Buttigieg made the right decision to admit that he's failed to keep the peace between cops and citizens in South Bend. It's a hard choice to make. I'm not sure exactly what's going to come of it. And last night we saw a lot of back and forth between these candidates, and we're going to see in the next debate when there are less people on stage, we'll see if it's as raucous. But Saagar, tell me what you think about what's been going on. What's on your radar?
It's no surprise. What's on my radar is what I was talking about earlier, which is, I believe, is the Democratic Achilles heel going in to 2020. It is a radical immigration standard when every single one of the Democratic candidates, the major candidates on that stage, raised their hand to pledge that health insurance would cover illegal immigrants. Like I said, President Obama made an entire speech before Congress to assure them that this would not be the case. I cannot think of a single more animating issue for the entire right. Immigration is the #1 area of concern. It puts the Democratic Party completely out of step with the rest of the country, who believe, yes, we need some sort of sensible immigration standard. Overall, they want less immigration. Overall, they believe that illegal immigrants should be paying fines and should not be getting government benefits. It could not be a more ubiquitous standard. The whole point of this is that it negates the rest of the Democratic agenda. If you want to expand the social safety net, you must inherently reduce the size of the population that is going to apply to. Letting in 1.5 million legal immigrants, plus God knows however many illegal immigrants that come per year, is just not going to make you an electable candidate. I know you, Jamal, you've heard me sound off on this for the last month or so.
This is your thing. This is your jam this week.
It is my thing because I think it's so important for the Democratic Party to reconcile itself to some sort of immigration standard, which is not a de facto open border. Let's take a listen, because I think it's such a stark moment of when they all raised their hands last night.
Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants.
I mean, that's amazing. That is not. That
What's
is
amazing
scene.
is a bunch of adults raise their hand like second graders when they're told to by some moderator sitting in front of them.
It's also true, right? Yeah, it's like the tyranny of authority.
Yes, exactly. My cousin used to say, "I'm the oldest," and we all had to do what she said. So listen, I think that's you raise good concerns. I am worried a little bit about immigration because I think it is the dragon in the room, and Democrats need to be able to deal with it. But Democrats have to have an alternate course of dealing with it. They can't just copy what Donald Trump's course is. And what people are worried about is that you end up having a bunch of people in the country, particularly kids who are in school, sitting next to American-born kids or American naturalized kids. And those kids who are sitting there will have, they won't have vaccinations. They'll have some problem or health problem that nobody knows about. And because they're afraid to go to the doctor, then our kids will all be in jeopardy because of it. I think that's one of the things people are worried about. How is it when people are here that we make sure they're healthy while they're living amongst us?
It's a very fair question, and it really speaks to the complete failure of Congress to get anything like this done. That we have to talk about providing health care to illegal immigrants when we really should just be able to deal or somehow find a solution to the problem. I would actually really like to see a lot more from the Democratic candidates on what they're actually going to do about illegal immigration rather than providing benefits to illegal immigrants.
Well,
but tell me what's on your radar, Jamal.
That is the question. Yeah. All right. As last night was a pretty amazing thing to see when you watched it. Kamala Harris started off as the only, as she said, as the only black person on this stage, I would like to speak on the issue of race. That is how Senator Kamala Harris began her assault on former Vice President Joe Biden's record. A practiced prosecutor, Harris laid in wait for Biden for an hour, letting issue after issue come and go. But when the issue of race came up in another context with other candidates, she pounced on Biden. Harris was offended by the vice president's positive recollections of working with segregationist senators. But there was more. The California senator was in the second class of African-American kids bused to integrate her school in Berkeley, California. And Biden, he opposed busing. Biden fired back with an argument quite similar to the one segregationists used to use. States' rights. He was against busing because he was against the federal imposition. He wasn't against busing at all. He wasn't against busing mostly. He was just against the federal imposition of busing. Harris unleashed the full power of her oratory. That's where the federal government must step in, she said. That's why we have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, why we need to pass the Equality Act. And she went on and on. Biden's argument was decimated. Kamala Harris has been missing for much of the last few weeks. Her star seemed faded. Her campaign was languishing. But last night, Kamala Harris came back. For voters looking for a candidate to take on Trump, last night, Kamala Harris looked tough enough.
She obviously practiced, and she came ready to fight. I think she won unequivocally in that exchange. And you're right. I mean, watching Joe Biden make a states' rights argument, I was like, what century am I in? It was like...
And look, and here's part of what it is. Yeah. He could legitimately say, in that time period, this is what I thought based on
my views have evolved.
My views have evolved. And also, I don't really look back at that as my brightest shining moment in public life. It's not something I'm really proud of. But it's like he never sort of takes that stance.
Right. Pete Buttigieg was like, I failed. There's nothing wrong with saying that. It's actually quite poignant. People are very accepting of failure. It's that that knee jerk, he almost seemed upset that she had brought it up. He's like, there's not a racist. But you know what? I mean, it was really an odd response.
And, we talk about this impeachment thing with Donald Trump. One of the things that helped Bill Clinton out in 1998 was that he did go on national television and accept responsibility for the things that he did wrong and asked basically for the American public to forgive him. And the one thing the American public is, they believe every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. People are willing to forgive you for your mistakes, but you got to own up to it.
I couldn't agree more. So, very interesting. Next on Rising, Hill TV's Crystal Ball is still on the ground in Miami.
She shares her reactions to last night's electric debate, and that's coming up when Rising returns.